And finally tonight, we must come back to this extraordinary story of the FBI's involvement in the censorship of the Hunter Biden story. What we learned yesterday with the latest installment of the Twitter Files is nothing short of astounding. Let's talk for a minute about raising children in this context, shall we? Trust me, I'm going to bring it back to the FBI in a moment. But when you're trying to raise your child to make good decisions, there's a couple of techniques you can employ, right, to sort of point them in the right direction. So when they're off on their own and they're faced with a moral or ethical dilemma, they'll do the right thing. You see, it's one thing to be one of those parents who's constantly hovering over your kid, and anytime anything comes up and they have to make the moral choice, you step in and say, oh, Johnny, you should do this, or Jane, this is the right choice to make. But what you really want to do as a parent is you want to push your kids in the right direction so when you're not there, they're going to do the right thing. And how do you do that? How do you raise a child to do the right thing? Well, it's typical parenting techniques. You've got a carrot and you've got a stick. You want to reward your child with a carrot when they do the right thing and they follow your rules and adhere to your principles and values at home. And then, of course, well, sadly, sometimes you got to use that stick. You got to punish the child if they don't do the right thing. Now, let's look at what the FBI did with Twitter, because they knew about the Hunter Biden laptop story in December of 2019. They knew exactly what was on that laptop. They knew where that laptop came from. They knew for sure that it was Hunter Biden's laptop, and they knew all of the evidence that was contained in that hard drive was real and legitimate and not the result of Russian propaganda. And for 10 months, they groomed the employees at Twitter. They trained, they taught, they raised those little mush-minded executives at Twitter so that eventually, when the time came, they would do the right thing. What was the right thing? What was the time that they were waiting for? Well, the time was a story that was going to hit either on a website or on a social media site or maybe even in a newspaper like the New York Post. A story full of dastardly, ugly, despicable, disgusting criminal behavior by Joe Biden's son, Hunter. They knew it was coming. They knew it was coming at some point during 2020, and they needed to make sure that when the time came and that story hit, well, their little children at Twitter would do the right thing. And the right thing was to kill the story. The right thing was to delete that story, censor the story, and if they really were good boys and girls, they'd actually demonize anybody who talked about the story or promoted the story as a traitor to our country. So they had to employ typical parenting techniques, the carrot and the stick. Well, the stick was pretty obvious. FBI comes knocking on your door and they say, yeah, we're from the FBI, we have a few questions. That's already a pretty hefty stick, because one knows what happens if you talk to the FBI and you don't give them the answer that they want. I mean, you're now suspected of criminal behavior yourself. For 10 months, they told the executives at Twitter and other social media companies that this story from Hunter Biden was coming down the pike, and when you saw it, you should know that it's nothing more than a hack job from Russian propagandists who hacked into somebody's private files, and now they've dumped it just to help Donald Trump. And the second you see that, you've got to delete it and you've got to censor it. And if you don't, well, maybe you're part of the problem. Maybe you're in league with the Russians. Maybe you're a propagandist. Maybe you're trying to steal the election. Maybe you need to be surveilled. Maybe you need to be indicted. That's what the FBI does without even saying it, because they're the FBI. That's a hell of a stick. Oh, and the carrot? Wow. The carrot was something else too. $3.4 million handed over to Twitter to reimburse them for all the man hours that were used to do the FBI's heavy lifting and analyzing all those tweets and the origins of the stories and the IP addresses of the people who were tweeting information out that the FBI didn't really like. $3.4 million in reimbursements to make sure that the folks at Twitter got a little something for their efforts. $3.4 million from the U.S. Treasury. Tax dollars. Your dollars. You paid for this. You paid for the FBI to sweeten the deal so that Twitter could silence this story that was an infringement on your civil rights, your First Amendment rights. Carrot and stick. Works every time. and it worked for the FBI. If only it weren't so illegal. That's it for tonight. We'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, I'll see you on the radio.